Gwart Show is sponsored by Ellipsis Labs. Ellipsis Labs is building a world where mainstream finance happens on-chain. Their first product, Phoenix, is a fully on-chain limit order book DEX on Solana, doing hundreds of millions of dollars in volume with 100% unincentivized users and liquidity. I know this team personally. They're one of the strongest teams you're going to find, and they happen to be hiring engineers right now. If you're passionate about DeFi and interested in building something sustainable in this space, visit ellipsislabs.xyz or find them on Twitter at ellipsis_labs. Hey guys, I'm here today with Dean Eigenmann. Dean Eigenmann is an MEV searcher, well known in the space, has a lot of very interesting thoughts on the MEV landscape, and it'll be interesting to learn from him. So, welcome, Dean.
Thank you.
Okay, well, where should we start? I think, okay, what do you see at the MEV landscape right now? Just like when you're looking at the game. I think so. You were on a podcast maybe 6 months ago. It was a really good one, and you sort of gave a lot of interesting, I think, thoughts on where you think MEV is largely headed. And I'd just like to know what you see currently. I mean, you could talk about Ethereum specifically, or other chains, or just like what we're seeing evolving. And maybe sort of if you want to introduce yourself a little bit as well, and kind of what you guys do.
Yeah, I mean, I think the last podcast when we spoke about MEV, we were like still it was very early in the BSC stage, and things have like all the tooling that you have on Ethereum has kind of like it's come to the rest of the ecosystem now as well, and so you get the long tail maturity across the space.
So do you focus mainly on BSC still?
Yes and no. We still focus on EVM heavy chains.
Yeah.
And we focus on chains where fees are low.
Okay, so you tweeted maybe 4 months ago now, and you said the entire MEV market is bound to become a wholly vertically integrated oligopoly. We are less than 6 months away from this reality. Where are we right now? What do you see? Like, do you see primarily vertical integration? I mean, I know there's a lot of discussion about vertically integrated searcher builders right now. Would you say we're at that stage, nearing that stage?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're at the cusp of that stage. Teams are kind of merging. Builders are running, searchers are running validators and stuff like that. And I think that's the natural way this entire game plays out, right? Like, if you have the capabilities to view the market in some holistic way, then you're gonna take that opportunity.
I don't know. Maybe this is more of a subjective question, but how bad do you think maybe just specifically with Ethereum right now, how bad do you think builder separation is, builder centralization, and how big of a deal is this? Like a lot of people have sort of contended that block production will become centralized and ideally verification will be decentralized. I mean, how big of a deal do you think it is that Beaver Build is building 40% of the blocks now?
I think, all the MEV solutions which they've just kind of created a more centralized system. Every like MEV solution just kind of bubbles the layer. It bubbles it up to the next layer of the stack, right? So like, before you were playing in the mempool, now you can't play in the mempool anymore. So you're like a validator and blah blah blah. And so it just like it's just re-centralizing the mempool. So I feel like a lot of the things that are created to solve MEV actually make it a worse status quo or make it worse than the status quo.
Do you think that the design of PBS, proposer builder separation for Ethereum, so right now we have these trusted relays, right? And a lot of builders are building with MEV Boost, which is this flashbot system. Do you think that the design implementation of PBS has been like, well, let me ask you, and this is another way, and this is coming from another side, as opposed to the mechanism designer. You're the actual, you're the searcher. You're actually the one using these systems on a daily basis. Do you think that this could have been implemented better? And like, what do you think went wrong? If you think that this centralization sort of is an issue that we've been discussing.
I don't know. Like, it's always easy to, from the sidelines, say you could make a better market. I don't know what my solution would have been to how blocks are built currently and things like that. Like, I think Ethereum's current solution probably works. My main goal is bringing the efficiency to users, and so if that's with these new models, then sure.
Do you think that Enshrined PBS, or sort of some of the designs that have been put forward thus far, like, do you think this is feasible? Because I mean, right now we have these trusted relays, right? And it's sort of, the idea is to keep the builders from duping validators and the validators from duping the builders, right? So it's sort of like this intermediary. And do you think that, like, Enshrined, like, first of all, are we actually making progress on something of the sort? And is this something that is really possible in practice? I don't know how closely you follow some of like the most recent Ethereum, proposals and whatnot.
What do you mean? Like, I think the way things are done right now, it just results in a bigger cabal, right? Like,
yeah,
validators and block builders and relayers, and yeah.
Do you think that what we're working on now, or I say I'm not working on this, but do you think that the people who are working on this in terms of like enshrining these relays, like, is this possible? And does this help? Maybe that's a better way to ask. I mean, is this something that can help, or is your opinion sort of that this cabal is set in stone and this is the direction we're headed?
I don't think it's set in stone. The nice thing is that market participants are able to join and leave very free willingly because of the decentralized nature. But like, yeah, there's gonna be a huge capture of that occurs.
When I heard you before talking, you were talking about atomic strategies versus non-atomic strategies. Atomic strategies, you're taking on inventory risk. Is that correct?
Atomic strategies, you're not taking on inventory.
Okay, sorry. Okay, so non-atomic strategies, you're taking on inventory risk.
Yeah.
And so is this part of like what you see with these bigger builders like Beaver and rsync, like they're able to take on this inventory risk because they have a lot of these assets on their balance sheet, right? Is this what you see as like driving a lot of the centralizing forces?
Well, that's essentially goal, right? Like, the way you bring efficiency to all of these markets is like when you're the centralized clearinghouse, right? You have an overview of the entire market, and you're able to take on certain risk, like inventory risk, because you know what's going to happen, because you've predicted that. Yeah. So like, non-atomic strategies will be, I think, in the future, the main strategy. Like the long tail strategies that are atomic are gonna like fizzle out, and most strategies will end up being non-atomic strategies.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that also sort of reinforces the idea that there's this like growing cabal that continues to eat up. Are you concerned? Okay, so like pivoting a little bit, are you concerned? Well, maybe not you, but how do you see censorship with the direction we're headed? Like, is this a big concern? Do you see the censorship both of like maybe the OFAC type censorship, but then also just being able to censor transactions if you're a big builder? Like, is this concerning, or are we converging on some equilibrium that will find a steady state?
There's an interesting, like, the whole like censoring transactions is kind of interesting, because you first of all, you don't know if a transaction was censored versus if it was just missed.
Right.
Like, I think that builders shouldn't censor any transactions. Obviously, that's my idealistic view. I also have to sometimes deal with the lawyers who tell me what I can and can't do. I feel as though on a long enough time scale, there will be enough, or there will be sufficient validators who are maintaining a certain level of benevolence, and so not censoring any transaction. So just including what they see. Like Bitcoin miners have kind of done this for a while, right?
Yeah. Yeah, in fact, like there's been pushback. I think like Marathon Mining Pool was censoring for a short period, or I forget exactly what they were doing. I don't want to misquote, but they had an OFAC list, and then more recently there was a pool that was censoring, which was kind of interesting. It was hard to it was the mempool kind of had to be reverse engineered to figure this out, but they were probably filtering some OFAC transactions, and yeah, there was like some social pressure, and then they said, okay, we're not going to do this anymore. But as like these systems grow, like as governments become increasingly aware as to what defines censorship, and do you actually have the ability to exclude versus include transactions? Like it's certainly a question. I think that with Ethereum, like the biggest builders, two of the biggest builders are censoring, and then there's one sort of benevolent builder, if you will. What you see as like the current state of geographic distribution, and then also like how important is this becoming in your mind?
I think it depends on the strategy. For market making strategies, almost everyone it's the Tokyo AWS data center because all the exchanges are there.
Right, exactly.
Like we have a very good process on co-locating with nodes that we know are miners in on the networks that we do MEV on. I think in like Ethereum and stuff like that, the co-location is like the last mile. You're still better off optimizing other parts of your algorithm before you go to that last leg. I think you can gain more efficiencies by like fine-tuning Go Ethereum and things like that versus co-locating.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think like for sex decks are probably co-location is more important. But then some of these like more long tail strategies, it's probably like you were saying, like optimizing around the code. So how different, and you kind of started this by saying that you're seeing a lot of what started on Ethereum now moving to BSC. How different is MEV without exposing too much of your strategies, how different is MEV on Ethereum versus BSC? Like just, I don't know, competition and strategies and whatnot.
About a year, probably the last time when we started, it was a lot easier on BSC versus on Ethereum. But I think BSC has matured significantly and is turning similar to or has gone on a similar trajectory like the Ethereum ecosystem. So you have relays, you have private mempools, all that kind of stuff. So I think like the ecosystems are almost parallel.
Do you think that a lot of the builders and searchers that are, I guess, working on Ethereum are also working on BSC, or like are these your competition now or not really?
I don't think they are. People stick to their networks.
Yeah, I want to ask you about L2s more in a second, but like, what do you see in any other EVM chains? Like, or is BSC primarily where you're focused, and then is that pretty much it?
No, like our calculation has always been it's like the cost of experimentation plus the return. That's kind of how we figure out what chain to go on, which was like in the bull market, it just made BSC super accessible. We're looking at a whole bunch of other EVM related chains. We're looking at non-EVM chains. We're like looking at doing MEV on Osmosis. We're looking at doing cross-chain MEV.
Yeah, like how big of a jump would it be for you guys? Like, I don't know. I say you say you're looking. I mean, it sounds like, and I've heard you say this before, like a lot of what you do is sort of data research and like figuring out like whether or not there's a market for what you guys can do. How big of a jump is it like for a firm like yours to say like, okay, well, we're going to start doing MEV on Solana, for example? Like, would that be a huge like investment and like sort of overhead prior to getting in?
Solana, I think, is a huge one because of like the differences it has with most other blockchains. But like,
Yeah.
for example, from Ethereum or from Uniswap backruns to Osmosis backruns, it's not that much of a step.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The Solana ecosystem would be a huge.
On that note, like, what do you think of? Okay, so I had Anatoly on earlier this year, and he said the faster a chain goes, the less MEV there is. True or false?
It's probably true. Like, that's when co-location becomes important. That's when you start to run into that high frequency trading problem, which is who has the closest network cable to the server that's hosting the orders, and yeah, then you start to try and co-locate and hyper optimize everything so that you can be in those nanoseconds.
Yeah, that makes sense. And like, I think that in a sense, I think that Solana has sort of accepted this and has said like, this is the path we're going, and it's going to be super fast, and like people may need to co-locate around these validators or builders or whatever. Like, I mean, that was sort of the essence of it. It's just interesting, yeah, to hear that type of thing. So how much MEV is being done with L2s? Like, because obviously L2s have these single sequencers, so it's not this consensus leader type election thing, right? Like, and so like what does the MEV look like on L2s, and is this a big opportunity or not really?
We haven't looked that much into it yet, I have to say. I assume we do, things pop up on our radar that look interesting, and I think it's going to be a huge space in the mid to long term. But yeah, right now with everything being kind of single sequencer environment and stuff like that, it's probably more limited than it would be in a couple of months. Like, I think cross-chain MEV is going to be huge. I think that like roll-up bridge MEV and all of that stuff is going to be insane.
Yeah. What do you have any thoughts? Maybe not even from an MEV perspective, but just do you have any thoughts on shared sequencing? Like it is this something? Because the thing is, like right now on L2s, there's a single sequencer, and there's not people getting like sandwiched to death, really, right? Because like they're providing like, is it first come first serve basically for these L2 sequencers? So like, is opening up the door with something like a shared sequencer or a much more distributed kind of like builder set, like, is this something that should even be worth pursuing? Like, I joke a lot about how I think that all the sequencers should just stay centralized. Like, if you want to give you a really good execution, but like, I know this isn't like the long-term ideal, but like, what are your thoughts? Like, is this, what do you think of shared sequencers, first of all, maybe?
Idealistically, it makes sense, right? Because the single sequencer is kind of like the benevolent thing, right? Like, you're not getting sandwiched just because the
Coinbase is running it.
Yeah, right. But they could, and so I think for that purpose, it makes sense to do the whole shared sequencer stuff. It's such a weird give and a take, right? Like, we always there's so many we've made all these things like so composable and broken it down that like, is it better? Like, is something posting on ETH that is controlled by one person better than a single database? I don't know.
Yeah, I think this is a question a lot of people are asking, but there's a lot of smart people working on this. So, I think the vision is like, like what you were saying, idealistically, like we have some system whereby there's similar, at least goals, aspirations of decentralization within these L2s, but it does seem like, right now. And I mean, it is kind of a give or take also in the sense that like users are getting better execution for the most part. You know what I mean? Like they're not getting sandwiched. I think it'll be interesting to see. It's interesting to hear you say that cross-chain MEV will be huge. What do you think about intents? Like this has been a huge buzzword recently. Like, is this just limit orders or is this just private order flow?
Intents are interesting because I had this conversation with the team yesterday. Intents are interesting because like everything's always been designed as intents. The problem is it intents once again like explodes the entire design space, right? Because for every intent, you now have a different solver architecture, and then you'd have to figure out, or the people who like are able to compete are the ones who figure out how to link solver architectures or link solvers with other solvers that are unrelated and things like that, right? So it just like it blows up the entire like design space again, which means there's just like more and more. We're bringing. It's like this paradox of like creating more of these like decentralized points where you then need to have like an MEV shop that kind of has the holistic overview in order to bring market efficiency, right? Like the most efficient solver is one that's going to be solving over multiple protocols, and you can only do that like as a shop that has an understanding of multiple protocols. Yeah. I view that. I think that most MEV shops will do the same thing, which is they're gonna do MEV, they're gonna do market making, and they're gonna do other like liquidity provision type things that fall into that circle as long as it brings efficiency within a market, right? Because you need to have kind of the whole overview. And like if you're solving for CowSwap, you're going to solve for Uniswap, and you're going to try and use your liquidity on both exchanges and things.
What do you think? And once again, this is another thing I heard you talk about, like this idea that some shops, and I think you put yourself in this category, may be willing to operate at a theoretical loss for a while in order to crowd somebody out of a strategy, right? Like you're just, I mean, the idea is like you're richer than somebody and you can just carry on a strategy for long enough that they're not going to make money and then you can capture the market. Is this what you like? Are we increasingly going this direction still, would you say? Like with it, and also in terms of, maybe you can just answer that, and then also with these long tail opportunities, are there still small searchers that are sending bundles and landing them? Like, are we like, what are your thoughts?
You're definitely still seeing small searchers that are landing bundles. Well, I say small searcher, but what the fuck is a small searcher?
Yeah, I don't know.
Who knows, right? Like you're seeing bots that are running single strategies that are very specific, so very long tail.
Okay.
I think in a lot of the environments, the game right now is outbidding everyone, and so you're a lot of people are losing money on their strategies, I think, to price out competition.
Thanks for listening to The Gwart Show on the Blockspace Podcast Network. Subscribe to our newsletter at blockspace.media to get the show directly to your inbox. Show links, transcripts, and Bitcoin articles twice per week. Stay ahead of the conversation by visiting blockspace.media.
What do you see? Like, is this going to be the future, like the AMM design? And also, do AMM still have a lot of work to do in terms of improving execution and whatnot for users?
AMMs are really good at what they do, and there's a lot of there's very simple design solutions to mitigate a lot of MEV in AMMs.
Yeah.
Like if you turn an AMM into a linear function, all inputs are in and then all outputs come out, and you settle one price in a block. Like if your AMM is a chain, then you don't have sandwiching, right? I think the problem with all of this stuff then becomes like it's then we're like trying to rationalize about what the definition of MEV is. right? Which inevitably in the end is just some form of arbitrage.
And I heard you kind of saying that before as well. You're saying like, I don't know that you would consider all stat arb, for example, to be MEV, right? Like
I don't even think that like the things we do at Blanc anymore are MEV. It's just like, stat arb with inputs from different sources which happen to be on chain.
Is sandwiching bad still? Is this like, would you say, because I think a lot of people, when they hear sandwiching, this is like the worst form to them. Like this is something that's like very, very bad. And at least insofar as for users, I think people find this to be like one of the most extractive. And then obviously Jared from Subway kind of exacerbated the hype around sandwiching. Like are sandwiches still like you see like if you look at the actual amounts that are being sandwiched, like the overwhelming majority of time it's pretty trivial, right? Like it's like maybe $1.50 or $2. Like if you go and track, it's quite interesting. Like you hear these stories, people getting sandwiched for like $50,000. Like those are massive outliers, right? But like is this still a big problem? Or are users like starting to get better execution either from app interfaces or through wallets or whatever it may be, RPCs?
I think sandwiching is inherently a UX issue.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Like most MEV boils down to a UX issue, other than the like stuff that you just can't get out of protocols, right? Like some MEV just has to happen, like it has to exist. Like someone needs to rebalance pools, someone needs to
and liquidations,
right. But like sandwiches and things like that's just a UX issue. And I think most interfaces and things like that it's been abstracted away enough from users where you're not trading on Ether Delta or Uniswap V1 with 100% slippage anymore. Like,
what do you think about? Because this is something that I've thought about personally, and I don't know that I have strong feelings one way or another, but what do you think about the sort of necessity to send transactions to a private, through a private relay or something? Like, is this good? It's good for users, right? Like they're getting better execution, but in terms of like sort of the centralizing vectors along the supply chain now, when users are using, blockchains, like
it adds trusted parties again,
right? Exactly.
Because now transactions are the most valuable form of data, because it's data that has value attached to it. And so sending your transaction to a private relay, like you inherently have to re-add trust, because there's a lot more that can be done with that information than with just a signed message, for example, right? Because there's some inherent value attached to it.
Yeah, and I think that's like I know Uri Klarman was made like like one of the maybe it was Thogard, I forget, one of these MEV guys made this tweet about like how many sort of like centralized parties were sending transactions through now. And I'm just wondering, like, for you ideologically, is this a big like, does this really go against our ideals? And also, is there even a way to prevent like having to send effectively private, your transactions through private order flow?
I don't know what the research space looks like at this point. I don't have enough time to like look at everything that happens, but I hope that people are looking at more oblivious transfer protocols and things like that, to bring on transaction privacy. Like in an ideal world, I could send my transaction to any node, and the node doesn't know what's happening up until inclusion, right? That would be the ideal.
Is there a way to promote geographic distribution, or decentralization rather? Like I know that I think somebody wrote this, or maybe it was even Phil Diane wrote this article about how you should be a geographic distribution or decentralization maxi. Like, is this something that can be promoted, or with these types of systems, not really?
I don't know if it can be, right? Like Ethereum tried to motivate people to run their own validators by making it 32 and you can't delegate and stuff like that, right? And I think inherently systems usually tend to re-centralize.
Yes.
And so I don't know if you can fully mitigate that. Like Ethereum solution was the 32 thing. You can't delegate, but we got Lido, right?
Right.
Um, is Lido centralized? No, probably not. Like, there's how many providers underneath Lido, but yeah, like that's just the way it's gonna happen, right? Like,
yeah, exactly. And I think, I mean, Lido, obviously, it's a DAO, and like you said, it's sort of an umbrella of validators. So, and obviously the counterclaim is like, if it wasn't Lido, it would have been Coinbase and Binance, which, given how these systems work, like even if it's sort of the lesser of two evils, it does. Yeah, I mean, there's probably a good bit of legitimacy to that claim. So, yeah, I want to ask you, like, what do you view as like the differences between TradFi colocation and TradFi optimizing their code, and then versus MEV? Like because I hear this, like, sort of people say MEV is like very similar to TradFi. Like, would you agree with, like, with high frequency trading TradFi? Would you agree with this, or what are your thoughts?
So we tried to hire some people out of TradFi, and they were overwhelmed with the amount that we had to do, because in TradFi you just buy the shorter cable. Well,
Right.
you don't just buy the shorter cable. You obviously, there's some engineering stuff as well, right? But like the I think the amount of like domain specific knowledge that's needed for MEV is a lot more broad, especially like all of these like weird like protocols that you can link up together and interoperate in order to extract some form of value, right? And so the real stars are the ones who are able to have this huge knowledge base and link all of that stuff together, more so than just the geolocation alpha.
Yeah, that makes sense. There's been discussion recently about these timing games, like basically simulating latency. Is this something that you think is, I don't know, solvable, or like what are your thoughts on these kind of like specifically this kind of like timing game thing that's kind of come up as of late?
I haven't seen anything around that, like delaying transactions or.
Yeah, like I think the essence of it, and now I'm having to explain, but so probably not like the best person to do so, but it's like, you, like, when you send your block to the relay, like there's like these 200 milliseconds that they simulate it, I guess.
Yeah.
And so they're like, I guess builders are like actively pushing that back and back so that they can get the final, like be the final bids to be simulated. But I think this is something that's occurring on Ethereum, and it's becoming a bigger problem. And I actually just read recently today that Coinbase is now maybe playing these timing games. So it looks like it's something that you may have to do to be competitive, but it doesn't sound like hopefully you have to do that on BSC yet. Somebody, side note, somebody called you the SEP of BSC. Would you agree with that?
Maybe. I don't know.
I think that's kind of a compliment.
I take it as a compliment. The SCP guys are incredibly smart. I know Lev and Co very, or I know them personally, and they're incredibly smart. So I'll take that as a compliment. Yeah.
It's kind of interesting. Like, you don't hear these names very often, right? Like MEV generally stays under the radar. I would say these shops try to stay under the radar, which makes total sense, right? Would you say that there's been like, I don't know, somewhat of I don't know how I want to phrase this. I don't want to make it sound like too cynical, but has there been like almost sort of it's been like taboo almost to talk about who's building blocks and like who these people are, or is it just not something
everyone kind of knows who?
Right, exactly.
Like, we know who SCP's block builder is. We know who Wintermuse's block builder is and stuff like that. I find it weird that like it's like we've had this discussion in the team, and we generally are relatively like anonymous on who's on the team and things like that. But like with our validators, or if like with the block builders that we were planning on launching and the relays that we're planning on launching and things like that, we're going to be wholly transparent and just be like, hey, this is our thing.
Yeah, I think maybe, and I'm hypothesizing here, but like these are real firms that people know, right? Like you said, it's like sort of everybody kind of knows. I think maybe like the decentralization aspect, like ideally, we don't know that one firm of 20 guys is building 40% of the blocks on Ethereum. Like that's like functionally, this is how I see it. And I totally understand why they want to stay under the radar, right? For like multiple reasons. But it does seem like there's somewhat of a reluctance to like talk about this. And I
Yeah.
mean,
What's even weird about them, like, sure, they want to stay on the radar, but what's even weird about them is like they don't link their technologies, right? Like they have a different name for their block builder, they have a different
right.
name for their relay, they have a different name for whatever. So like they want to hide everything.
Do you think this has anything to do with the legal aspects? I mean, I would just assume maybe some.
It's all such a gray zone jurisdictionally speaking, and it really depends on where you're in. And like some places it's fine, and some places it's not fine. Where it's like really hard. I don't think I honestly think it's more of the trying to avoid the Twitter mob than anything else.
Yes, yes, exactly.
I
Trying
don't.
to,
I don't think legality actually ploys much into it because, like, if an auditor or if a if a if anyone wants to look under the hood, you naming your builder different than your relay doesn't really help.
yeah, exactly. Like they're gonna figure it out. Do you think sandwiching is legal? And the reason I'm asking this, or maybe like, could there be an interpretation of sandwiching that may be illegal? Because there's a guy, Alex Neslobin, you probably know him, very sharp, and he understands traditional markets quite well. Like this is somebody who I defer to when somebody's talking about co-location and TradFi versus in DeFi or something, and like he's somebody who like genuinely understands TradFi markets, and he has sort of tossed out the idea every so often that there's some potential strategies and for what it's worth, this isn't my opinion as to whether or not it should be legal. I personally think that like you should be able to do whatever, okay? But like he has tossed out some ideas that maybe like some of these things could be considered, I don't know, insider trading or like right on the cusp.
So my opinion is the following: if you're using public domain, so like if you're using a public mempool and blah 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 blah, I don't think it should be illegal. You're operating with the same worldview that everyone else has. But that's how I would view it. Like I think it becomes finicky when you start buying private order flow and things like that. You should probably like that's questionable.
Interesting. Yeah. Like, and this is something that I have, you see a lot of people talking about like the transparency and openness and of these systems. And like, this is good, of course, but there are reasons like, for example, that Citadel doesn't front run in the way that like MEV people may. And like when they buy order flow, it's not exactly for the same reasons. And I think that people kind of conflate these sometimes. And it's like, this isn't exactly what's happening, right? Like it's more like, yeah. So I don't know if you had thoughts on that.
Also,
Like,
different entities have different risk appetites, right? Like Citadel might be more exposed to US jurisdictions than some other entity might be who's doing something else, yeah, it all depends on entity risk appetite, I guess.
yeah. And I would kind of like, intuitively I would agree with you regarding a public system, a public mempool is like it's not really material non-public information, like it's somebody broadcasts a transaction out there, I guess. Maybe, yeah, like so I've just it has been really interesting to follow some of this, and I do wonder, like, do you have any predictions as to like where this goes? Like, are there are people talking about how regulators probably aren't like so familiar with how MEV works, but they're starting to dig in. Like, do you have any predictions? I mean, hopefully you're safe in Switzerland, I would assume, I would assume, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I I do believe that when we spoke with the Swiss regulators, or the opinion that we heard from the Swiss regulators was, as long as you're doing things with public things that are like public mempool, it's fair game. Yeah, but the rules are going to change 3,000 times until they're written, right?
Do you think that, like, we've sort of talked about this a little bit, but like, do you think that these centralized builders, like, do you think that this is a big pressure point? Like, do you think this is a real vector of regulation? Like what we were talking about, like, it's not going to be difficult for Beaver Bill to be traced to SEP, like it's not. Do you think this is like a big vector of like, oh, okay, well, they can just pressure them? I mean, we see them already censoring OFAC transactions, right?
Yeah, that's definitely going to happen, right? Because there you have directors and shareholders and whatnot to go to, and so it would be nice to have more non-legal entities doing this stuff in the space.
Yeah, we're seeing that sort of play out a little bit already, but it's hard to know. Like, what you were saying that you would prefer builders not censor at all. Like, what do you see? Like, is this like concerning that Beaver and rsync are not including OFAC transactions, or is this like not a huge deal to you?
I'm like, I think it's problematic.
Yeah.
Like, mainly because I'm Swiss.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
I think it's problematic, but I understand why they have to if they're registered in specific countries. Like, if our entities are registered in specific countries, we have to do it as well, right? We don't build, and so we haven't had that run in yet. But yeah, in an ideal world, we wouldn't be censoring the protocol. Well, in a fully ideal world, we wouldn't be able to censor the transactions because we don't know what's in them, right?
Have you actually, that brings up an interesting point. Do you think such a future is possible with encrypted mempools? I mean, there's always kind of this like the argument is always kind of like, well, somebody has to decrypt that at some point, right? And like they haven't
a block, right? Somebody still has to make a block. And at that point, like, the only thing you're doing is you're pricing out those who can do MEV. And so honestly, I think not doing that is better, in a weird contradiction, because like, I would rather not have a highly well-endowed entity be the only one that's able to do MEV. Right,
exactly. And this is like sort of the catch-22, I think, of a lot of these solutions, is that you can reduce MEV, like functionally, you absolutely can reduce MEV, maybe down to a negligible level, but by doing that, you're almost always centralizing.
Make it more expensive. You always
exactly,
yeah. That's kind of how I view it.
Yeah.
Which is why I think that a lot of these MEV prop shops become vertically integrated, like clearinghouses, right?
Right.
Because they just need to be on all of the edges of the network in order to operate.
What are your overarching thoughts on crypto? Like, how are we doing? Is crypto exciting to you? Like, I know there's a lot of mechanism designers who do not care about crypto. Like, they've been nerd sniped, and they just want to do cool tricks and get paid to do it. You know what I mean? Like, you seem, from what I can infer, you seem pretty ideologically driven, I would say, but I don't know where you fall, like, in regards to crypto. I mean, or like what specifically?
I'd say I'm pretty ideologically driven, mainly because I've been trying to set up a bank account for the past week.
Yeah, I saw this.
Like, you know what? I spoke about this with my co-founder recently, and I think we're in a good spot. But I really appreciate Vitalik's post that he wrote about bringing, the cypherpunk back into crypto, because we kind of lost our way. I don't think that all of this consumer stuff matters. I don't think a lot of, I don't care for NFTs. I don't care for a lot of these consumer use cases, because I think that the financial use case is already $1 trillion industry, right? Just being able to freely move money is a valuable enough use case where we may not need any other use case, right? Like, I don't think, maybe we probably don't need crypto social. As long as that's my real thought on it. And so I'm sad that there's not more experimentation in the DeFi space. I feel like it's kind of become very quiet, and everyone's focusing on this New York crypto consumer stuff. And that's less interesting to me. I think that we should get back to bringing the currency into cryptocurrency.
Yeah, I mean, I'm 100% with you. I couldn't agree more. And when you say you'd like to see more experimentation in DeFi, what do you think is missing right now?
Everything is over collateralized money markets, right?
Yeah.
and so anything that allows me to bring more efficiency to my capital is something that is necessary in the space. I think shilling my own bags here, but Gearbox is a team that's been able to execute that quite well by building margin accounts on chain. But we need more experimentation like that, right? I think it needs to be, we need to venture out into more interesting DeFi use cases like that, rather than just over collateralized lending markets.
What do you think about restaking? Do you have any thoughts?
I think it's going to be a huge house of cards that will probably, I foresee that one of these restaking protocols will definitely cause some huge blow up. I don't know if it will cause a main chain to blow up or only one of the X down the road, but I think it's a huge systemic risk issue that I think will, but it's inevitable, right? You give people the tools to build those products, and they're going to build those products because it's the financialization of everything.
Do you view the current Ethereum roadmap with Rollups favorably? I mean, what do you think so far?
I honestly, when I was a bit more in touch with ETH2 research and stuff, I haven't kept that up to date. To me, the ecosystem looks like it's kind of funny. Cosmos kind of had this idea in 2014 or whenever they started already. And it seems like the world is kind of moving to a Cosmos-centric design space. And I'm actually kind of bullish at them if they can figure their shit out, and be the gold standard for that. So I think things are moving towards the app chain Cosmos style ecosystem.
Let me just ask, maybe more specifically, are you bullish any? Maybe not L2 are you bullish any L2 specifically, or do you look at any of the L2s and think these guys are on the right track versus these guys, or is it all sort of similar to you right now?
My main issue with L2s right now is that they all, or that a majority of them are EVM forks.
Right, exactly. Yeah. We haven't seen much experimentation there. I think a lot of people mentioned this.
Yeah, I tweeted about this a couple of days ago, is that you'd think that, now that we have near instant bridging with things like XLR and Squid Router and Wormhole and whatnot, you'd think that application specific chains would become more prevalent, but we haven't seen it yet. I fail to see a world in which we need 10,000 EVMs.
Right.
Yeah.
I think we're going to get Unichain. I feel pretty confident about this.
It would make sense. I think a DEX as a chain makes sense.
Yeah. I think that it's interesting because you hear Hayden kind of talk about this and talk about how he feels maybe stifled to some extent by the direction that Ethereum's gone, and it makes all the sense in the world for them to have their own chain. Yeah. Do you think that Ethereum should be attempting to innovate more on the L1, or do you where do you fall in that camp? Sort of the settlement layer, ultrasound money maybe / trying to make improvements.
I think Ethereum should move faster.
Yeah.
I think it's been pretty slow for a pretty long time, which has led a lot of other chains to catch up. And I think we may see a cycle where ETH is no longer the dominant application specific chain. right? But that happens, with technology. It's the inherent ossification of a system. People are scared to change it because there's a lot of money that's relying on it.
Do you look at Solana and think that, like, what are your thoughts on Solana? I kind of touched on that, but not really.
So I don't even have a Solana wallet. I've honestly never interacted with Solana. It's a completely different sphere of people than I interact with, which probably is a good thing, right? I may be like a crypto boomer. Like I may be now what I viewed Bitcoiners as 2 years ago, right? But I'm just on the ETH end. I think the winner will be somewhere in between an ETH and a Solana, or maybe the merging of the two, through bringing Solana style chains to settle on Ethereum using a Celestia, using something like that.
Tell me what is going on, like not from the MEV side, but just what is going on BSC? Like, is it degen? Like what? Because that's always sort of the.
I think it's mainly degen.
Yeah, and is there anything like of value there that it interests you, or is it just same old BSC?
They're launching an L2, but it's same old BSC. I think people underestimate BSC because it has a huge consumer usage rate. But
yeah,
it's just BSC.
Interesting. Yeah, that's sort of like what I mean. I think it's very popular in Asia. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and like that's just an area that like a lot of people on crypto Twitter, for example, just have no idea about. Like not dissimilar to Tron, although maybe some of Tron's numbers are a little bit fudged, but it does like so much USDT settles on Tron. People are just like completely unaware of this. So it's similar. Actually that's I wanted to ask you what that is. Tron. Like, do you guys ever do you do anything on Tron?
We were kind of looking at Tron. The amount of trades that happen for the strategies that we do, it just didn't make sense.
Well, I don't know I feel like we covered a lot. What do you think?
Yeah.
You got anything else interesting, little tidbits that you want to share? Something spicy? I feel like I asked you a lot of the spicy questions I wanted, so that's good.
I don't think I have anything. I'm not that spicy these days. I think I've become a chain boomer.
Yeah. Oh, actually, I actually did want to ask you one thing because I'm kind of a bit of a Bitcoiner myself. What do you like Bitcoin? Do you care about Bitcoin at all?
Does it interest you? I have not held a single Bitcoin since 2016.
Okay, so that answers that pretty easily.
I think Bitcoin is interesting for what it did, but it failed at the one promise that it wanted to serve, which is to be digital cash.
Yeah.
And it ossified so fast where people didn't let it become something, and now you have these teams that are wasting resources and time building on Bitcoin, like the Lightning Network team. Smart engineers, but why are they still working on that? They've been working on it for how many years, and how many users do they have?
Yeah, I think a lot of Bitcoiners would agree with you on that, and I think a lot of Bitcoiners are realizing that Lightning is not the end game. So maybe next time we talk, you'll be interested in some Bitcoin L2s if those are actually real yet. We're not entirely sure.
Is it a thing?
Yeah, it's kind of a thing. I mean, they're multi-sigs, but I'm a little bit. Yeah, I'm not too quick to pass judgment. I mean, most Ethereum L2s are multi-sig, so I'm not going to like cast aspersions yet. But yeah, no, I mean, I think a lot of people agree with you that Lightning has been at worst a dead end, and at best something that is certainly not going to support digital cash for the entire world. So yeah, well, Dean, it was awesome talking. Thank you for coming on. I thought we hit a lot of very interesting points. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.